Hello and welcome back to Build Propulsion Lab at Devoxx UK. We're going to talk about it in a second. Chris Heilmann,
Yes.
the man, the legend, is with us, our next speaker. And you for sure know Chris from tons of activities that he does. The books, the interviews where developers is the brand that a lot of those activities happen. Chris, welcome to the show.
Hello.
Great to see you in Devoxx UK.
Yeah, it's fun. I've never been here. I lived in the area for like 16 years, and now I came back 5 years later, and everything changed. And I've been to other Devoxes, but not the UK one yet. And it's great because I also like that it's not only London companies, but people from all over England. So that's really fun to see as well here.
Hear me out. That will be a hot take. Devoxx UK is one of the best Devoxes out there. It might not be the largest, but the venue.
It's great. I mean, it reminds me of Alexandra Palace, that the other bit where we had our Yahoo Hack Day in 2006. It's like one of those old buildings, or most of the train stations look like that as well.
So,
I mean, your hat fits in perfectly.
Yeah. I mean, my first impression was train station, and I was wrong. It's not. For those of you who cannot see the venue, it's pretty exciting. It's a huge market, like indoor farmers market venue that, like in 2 centuries by now, like in 19th century was used.
Like an Isabel King and Brunel thing, like St. Pancras Station, and these kind of
Exactly.
things look very similar to this. So
Yeah,
it's really lovely.
And Devoxx is happening here. The lighting is you can see daylight, which is not the luxury that you usually get in developer
in England,
conferences.
of all places.
Or in England, in foreign places, but it's May. I mean, that's the month to be.
month, yeah.
That's the month to be. And comparing to the basement that we're shoved into in Belgium,
Yeah.
that's like a huge improvement. So yeah, love it here. Great place to be. And Chris, you mentioned that your talk was about AI and UX.
Yeah. The fun thing was it was at the executive lounge, which is in the basement here.
But the expo at least is in the light.
But the idea of the talk was actually, I do this newsletter now, and where I basically have like AI news and all kind of things. So I read about 500 things a day, where companies basically say we're using AI now, and all of them are basically putting a chat client into something and hope that people create something with it. So I was analyzing this a bit, like how can you really use AI and machine learning in your applications to make them beneficial for the end user, to keep security, to keep privacy, and also not just generate stuff, like because a lot of the things that we say are intelligent solutions are actually just thinly veiled consumption machines. Like generate an image, and you cannot do anything with that image. But there is, for example, a system that you can host that model on your own machine, and you get an image that's with layers, so you can put them in Photoshop and keep editing them. So these kind of things, a non-destructive generation of things is what I talked about, and mainly ranted about how badly it's implemented at times. Because I'm very worried about the AI revolution taking over and replacing search. Web search has been dying for like 10 years, and I've for 2 years ago I wrote a blog post where I said the web starts on page 4, where it's basically looking for something, and the first 3 pages are like you might like this, or ads, or SEO content, like generated content just for the Google bot, and then you find something useful again, and that's getting worse and worse.
And now I would say the search is doomed basically, because all the garbage that it generated from AI is getting fed to the search engines.
Yeah.
And makes the search completely useless, basically. And we see a little bit right now, and it was a couple of months ago when Google highlighted an answer to a question from Quora that was actually taken directly from a ChatGPT hallucination, and it was absolutely wrong.
Yeah. I mean, OpenAI is going to release a search engine this month as well, what I saw. So that might be an interesting take on that. But I mean, the search engine market has been basically monetized wrongly for a long, long time. It was all about ads. There was no, you could not pay for a search engine to get better quality. You could things like, I mean, DuckDuckGo I think had a paid model at one time, but it never took off. And that was the thing that actually annoyed me the most, that there's so much content being created, and it's always the first answer. Like when you take code completion, for example, and as a developer, you went to Stack Overflow, and the first answer was always the answer that gave you the immediate result, but it was by a long shot not the best answer, because it just showed you the how, but not the why. It didn't show you why you should code something like that. It just said like, do this and believe it. And it's a bit like using ChatGPT or some code completion that is not clever and doesn't index the rest of your workspace around it is a bit like hitting I feel lucky in Google and get the first result all the time. So that's
but that's exactly the point, right? And it's not getting better, because what you get with ChatGPT is exactly that.
Yeah.
It gives you an answer that might be right, but it also might be a hallucination, and you don't have any context to compare it to.
Yeah.
When you're at Google, at least you can see the next results, and you can see that they are so different from the first one that first one might not be the correct one.
Yeah.
But when you work with generative UI, all you have is an answer.
It's all about context, and that's what I talked about as well. Like, I mean, in your code editor, anything that gets generated and has problems will be caught by your linter. And in ChatGPT, it doesn't, because you basically don't have any linting going on. So that would be, to me, the next step, that security companies, that privacy companies, and also another thing I showed, that GitHub had this thing when it generated the code, and then it immediately told you where else this code was already used, like which repo it came from, with which license. So you could basically realize, like, oh my God, that's a license I cannot actually use in my product, because it would basically get kicked out in the next audit. So that was something that I think where you put the things in context is the most important thing that you need to do here. And I also talked about our event, which is in July in Berlin with 15,000 people. And I was looking through 1,700 call for paper submissions. And that was all generative AI, and like the proper machine learning stuff is like really hard to find speakers for.
Yeah, speaking about that, you see the word valve, you know that it's generated by ChatGPT. Speaking about that, it's actually that generally, especially in Devoxx, the CFP system is open.
Yeah.
So you can see not only what you submitted, but generally the state of CFP. Yep. And you can see how this year the numbers of submissions is absolutely insane.
Yeah.
I think for Devoxx UK, it was something like 1,500 submissions.
Wow.
And for Vox Days, which are smaller events, it's almost 1,000. It's like 800 or something.
I caught a lot of them being ChatGPT generated as well.
This is exactly the answer. This is, if you wonder what happened, that suddenly everybody is submitting so many, because it became so easy, right? It used to take us a week to write a proper CFP, because you need to dwell on it, and you need to think about whether it's good or not, and it's hard to get started, it's hard to generate good quality. But now it takes you 20 seconds to write a submission, and you just shove it into all the possible CFPs, and this is what we end up with.
It also hurts me as somebody who's a mentor and coach for speakers, because in essence, when you have a ChatGPT generated CFP, that's not you. You're not going to use that language on stage. You're not going to be that person, because ChatGPT is basically a very excited Californian person from the mid-'80s. It's always happy, it's always bubbly, it's always like everything is the most important and coolest thing. And I mean, a CFP to me should tell me, like, what does the audience get from it? And what do you want to get across, and not like, oh, I'm going to change the life of people with my talk, which you're not. And it's just a very strange thing how these hyperbole is just ridiculous in those things. And I wonder if that actually will do something to our communication overall. I joked about that as well, like with the, do 3 bullet points and say, like, make a business email out of that, and the other person will have a plugin in Outlook that turns it back into 3 bullet points.
Exactly.
So we actually generate a lot of content that nobody ever reads or looks at.
Yeah. So that's for sure. We generate an email out of 3 bullet points, and on the receiving end, someone will generate 3 bullet points out of this email. Is it something that we can do as conference organizers to CFP as well? ChatGPT, to me, and get the essence what person is actually wanted to say.
I kind of thought about it. Some of the things were very, very academic and very long. So I took summarize this for me and then look at that. But I think there is a big danger, and I mean, with we are developers, I'm also looking at the whole market of automatic CV scanning and these kind of things, and it's just horrible because there's so many false positives and basically things looking for. I mean, I had that when I left Microsoft and I applied for another company. They asked me to apply for them. They offered me a job, and then they asked me to send my CV in, and then I get immediately like, oh, you can't work here. Although they asked me to, so because I don't have a degree, so I don't have a degree in American university, so it kicked me out. So I emailed them back and said like, why do you offer me a job? And then immediately, oh, that's the system. I'm sorry.
Yeah, ignore it. Yeah, ignore it. Yeah, you're good. Yeah, no, this is absolutely ridiculous. You know what? I mean, we unfortunately run a little bit behind, and the next talk here has already started, and we compete with their speaker, so we don't have a lot of time. But I would hate to finish our conversation in such a gloom state of affairs that we're all going to die and the internet is doomed.
I want to talk about something really cool.
Yes, let's talk about how do we save it.
Okay. We save it by being good programmers and thinking about the basics and going away from frameworks, going away from components that have already been built for us. A lot of developers nowadays are frameworkers. They're not really developers. They're just using stuff from other people and put them together. And if you want to stand out as a developer, you basically have to know the basic knowledge and know how to do things. We have to change the education system in coding completely as well. It's not about syntax. It's not about grammar of the language. It's about problem solving, and it's about data conversion. It's about understanding the need for your code, not how it's being written. And that brings me to the thing that I wanted to talk about, which is Code 100. Code 100 is a live coding competition that we're doing. We did it in Amsterdam, we did it in Zagreb, and now we're going to be in Manchester on the 22nd of May. It's a free event. You can come around and clap on people and be happy for them. It's 16 people on stage. It's a multiple choice coding rounds, and then it's live coding on a machine together. So and it's independent of language, so it's Java developers, Python developers. So we put JavaScript and Ruby developers together in one team, and they have to solve a problem together. And the winners of the one in Manchester are going to go to Berlin, and in Berlin we're going to have the final, and the winner gets 10,000 euros.
This is so cool.
And it's code100.dev is where you find it, and I am the one that has to come up with all the puzzles and the riddles.
ChatGPT?
No. And I made all of them for the Manchester. I made all of them Joy Division and New Order based.
This is
so I made it all about the bands and stuff. And
I love it.
It does my head in because I'm a JavaScript developer and I'm really good at front end, and I'm used to be a Perl developer in PHP. And then I look at some and I'm like, this is a really cool puzzle. And then I realize, oh damn, there's an inbuilt function in Python that does that.
Exactly, it's a one-liner in Java or whatever. Yeah. No, this is something I can relate. It's really hard to. I have a talk that talks about how cognitive science with for developers basically, and I try to run some of the how do you call it. Experiments that Professor Kahneman did with his studies adapted to developers. So I have some coding challenges, and it's funny to see how they are completely different for different programming languages, because something that is absolutely obvious for Java developer is a complete puzzler for Python developer, and the other way around. This is really fun
to see what people get stuck with.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, you're live in front of like 600 people. There's like all kind of stuff going on.
For sure.
It's of course shocking, but I mean, we had one in, for example, in Berlin last time. That was basically a regular expression. It was like a one-liner, and not a single one of the competitors knew what a regular expression was. It's like basically they just started completely with like, I'm a developer that uses Swift. I'm a developer that uses that. Like, the basics of the programming languages are basically lost to people. And I mean, maybe it's okay, you don't need them, but I think it's an interesting thing that the simple bits that you learn the longer you program, you go back to the things that you learned at the beginning. You always find the abstractions that do everything, and then like, actually, I don't need that, so why do I go back to a one-liner?
It doesn't do what I want to do, so I will just go into the basic. Now, you know what? In defense of generative AI and ChatGPT in particular, explaining what this regular expression does is a completely valid use case.
When I wrote my JavaScript book in 2006, the regular expression chapter was the longest that it took me. I wrote the book on the train actually because I lived here and I worked in Hammersmith, so I had like 1 hour Piccadilly line every day. So I wrote the book on the train, and the regular expression thing was just like, how do I explain this? It's one thing once you grok it, you don't think about it. So explaining it to others is when you start learning it. I was a professional JavaScript developer for 5 years when I wrote the book. And I realized when I wrote the book that I don't know anything about JavaScript because...
Oh, this is classic. I mean, this is what we do for conference talks as well, right? If you want to really understand something, try to explain it to figure out your gaps when you need to learn more.
The best way to learn is to start teaching.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. With that, Chris, thank you very much. It was a pleasure. You all, the URL for the competition again, I think that's the most exciting thing ever.
Code100.dev.
Code100.dev?
Yeah.
You go there, you sign up as audience, I guess?
Audience or participant.
Or
we got 10 people already. We need 6 more people on stage.
For the brave of you.
Yeah.
Excellent. Chris, thank you very much. It was a pleasure, as usual. And we'll see you in Code 100 or maybe in Zagreb, in Swift.
In Berlin in July at
in
We Are
Berlin.
Developers.
Yep. There are tons of great stuff coming up.
And online.
And online at We Are Developers. Chris, thank you very much.